welcome to The Day. And we begin with the collapse of the Dutch government after far-right lawmaker Geert Wilders left the governing coalition. His PVV Freedom Party won the most seats in the last election back in 2023, but he didn't become Prime Minister. Instead, he entered a shaky agreement with three other parties, which has now collapsed, ostensibly over migration.
The Dutch governing coalition started with a right-wing victory in late 2023 and ended just 18 months later when its winner, Geert Wilders, walked out on his coalition.
The
Freedom Party promised voters the strictest asylum policy ever, to be among the strictest countries in Europe. And we have proposed a plan to close the borders for asylum seekers and send them away.
Other coalition members condemned Wilders' move.
Irresponsible. There is a war in Europe, a few hours away from here in Ukraine. There's war in the Middle East. There are Trump's tariffs, all very important trade issues for an open economy like the Netherlands. And walking away from the table at that moment, I think it's scandalous.
The only thing I see here is someone who does not want to take responsibility, who's letting his voters down. There won't be a right-wing cabinet after this. That's what I'm afraid of.
Wilders' uncompromising approach meant the right-wing coalition was shaky throughout its short time in office. Following Wilders' withdrawal from the coalition, Prime Minister Schoof had this to say.
In the past few days, I have informed all four party leaders that the fall of the cabinet would be unnecessary and irresponsible, in my opinion. We are facing major challenges nationally and internationally, and more than ever, decisiveness is required for security, for our resilience, and for the economy in a rapidly changing world.
He announced that he and the government would be stepping down, but that he and the remaining ministers would stay on in a caretaker capacity. New elections are expected in the autumn, and possibly an even more radical anti-immigration campaign from Geert Wilders.
Simon Otjes is a political scientist at Leiden University in the Netherlands. Welcome to DW. Geert Wilders led the biggest party in Parliament, but he wasn't Prime Minister. With 2020 hindsight, was this coalition always destined to collapse?
That's always difficult to say. I think there would have been moments already previously where people would have predicted that the cabinet would have fallen, but there are also good reasons to assume that it wouldn't fall, it would be stable, given that a lot of the coalition parties are currently doing very poorly in the polls and wouldn't want to see new elections. So I think it's, as political scientists, you always have to watch out making very strong predictions.
And before this time, Geert Wilders gave his coalition partners an ultimatum: adopt his 10-point plan on migration or else. Just explain to us why they rejected his plan.
Well, they rejected his plan because it was a new plan, and they had already negotiated for a long time about a coalition agreement where all the parties were sort of able to agree on, and now suddenly it comes with new demands. So it was quite clear, actually, that the plan was mainly there to focus attention on migration and to ensure that Wilders had a way out of the coalition by sort of bringing in new demands, even though there was not a real good basis for renegotiation. So in many ways, they refused to sort of fall for this very classical political ploy where somebody threatens the stability of the coalition if they didn't cooperate with him. They said, we already have an agreement, we have negotiated that. Actually, in the fall, they had already renegotiated the elements of that. There was no reason to negotiate again, in particular given the declining migration numbers that we're currently seeing, as well as the fact that the PVV had a Minister of Migration who was able to implement a lot of policies, but hadn't been able to push through any legislation.
OK. I mean, this is what is so weird to us non-Dutch people about this. Geert Wilders, as you say, his minister was in charge of migration. And we have this situation where he presents you with this plan, having already negotiated a plan. So did he want that, or did he just want to collapse it? And if he did just want to collapse the government, what's his end game?
So in my estimation, he didn't really make a believable attempt to renegotiate. He just wanted to focus attention on migration and let the coalition fall on that to ensure that the upcoming elections will be a referendum about migration, because that will be beneficial to his party. In his view, it's likely that the coalition would fall in the coming months. It could fall over agriculture. The Netherlands has a nitrogen crisis that has been intractable for the last 7 years already. There is major budget renegotiations were coming up, in particularly given the increase in defense spending that NATO is going to demand. Those issues would have also maybe have led to a coalition collapse, and then Wilders anticipated that the coalition is going to collapse, so I'm going to focus attention on migration and ensure in that way that the coming elections will be a referendum on migration.
OK, so lots of big issues for Dutch people to contend with. How long is this uncertainty going to last? How long before the Prime Minister calls a new parliament, and how long, calls an election, and how long after that before a new government is likely to be installed?
So you can anticipate that the elections will be in the fall, likely October, and then after that we'll have to see what the new parliament looks like and to what extent there is a credible majority in there. We've had coalition negotiations last as short as 2 months, but the last coalition negotiation lasted much longer. And so in many ways, it really depends on what kind of majorities are possible in parliament, whether the PVV will be very large and will sort of be able to force a new coalition around it, or whether the other parties will have to cooperate with each other. That's all very unpredictable. What is certain is that there will be new elections, and these will likely be in the fall. They will likely be in October. But after that, I wouldn't make any strong predictions.
Thank you for saying you wouldn't make any strong predictions. I'm going to ask you for a prediction. Because Wilders says he wants to be the next Prime Minister. His PVV Party is popular. I was reading that its popularity has slipped somewhat, but it's still very popular. For him to become Prime Minister, would he have to go through this again, negotiate with other coalitions, and would anyone actually work with him at the head of the government?
So, I mean, the indications are that some parties have excluded Wilders becoming Prime Minister. Those are the parties who didn't govern with him this time. So that's the Christian Democrats, the Social Democrats, the Greens, the Liberals, Social Liberals. They've all indicated they won't govern with him. And then the question is the parties who are currently in government with him, whether they will have a majority again and perhaps create a Wilders Prime Minister. And so the question is then whether those parties will get a majority. The current polls say that they won't get a majority. They're currently at about 60 out of 150 seats. And the biggest question is whether the conservative liberals, the VVD, who's currently governing with them, will say Wilders is an unreliable partner and we won't govern with him again. And between 2012 and 2023, they had this position that they won't govern with the PVV, and then in 2023, the new leader Geert opened the door towards the PVV, and that basically led to this major shift in voters towards the PVV. And so, will they close that door again? Because that will actually be the way which the Liberals will grow, or will they keep this door open in order not to have to govern with the centre-left? Those are the major questions that the Liberals are currently considering, and it will be very decisive in what the new elections will look like.
And will Wilders be a big part of this next election? Will he be continue to be a big figure?
I expect that Wilders will continue as leader of the PVV, and he will certainly be one of the four major parties, maybe the 3 to 4 major parties that will always be on the platform. But whether he will be the largest, that will really be basically a coin toss. We don't know that yet. We don't know the dynamics of the campaign. It's likely that Wilders will be a major player, but as will Frans Timmermans, the leader of the Green Social Democratic Alliance, as will Henri Bontebal, the upcoming leader of the Christian Democrats, as will Dylan Jusilgus, the leader of the Liberals. Those will all play a role, and who will become Prime Minister after this, it's very unpredictable and will depend on what the voters will decide and what kind of majority can be found.
OK, thanks for talking us through that so clearly. Political scientist Simon Otjes from Leiden University. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the invitation.
Let's examine this with Amira Arashe. She's a senior research fellow with the Europe programme at Chatham House. Welcome to DW. This coalition was a shaky four-way deal from the start. Was it always going to implode?
We've had strong suspicions for a while that something like this might happen, and immigration is a particular sticking point and has led to the coalition government looking particularly frail at previous moments as well. Of course, it's only been in place for 11 months. Within those 11 months, it's had at least 4, if not 5, cabinet crises, as we call them. So it was a frail coalition. There was very little trust among the coalition partners. So it was always a question of when, not if.
Geert Wilders' Freedom Party is popular. He says he wants to be the next Prime Minister. Is that likely?
I mean, at this point, it's $1 million question, of course. However, I will say that in the past, whenever a coalition partner or a party has withdrawn from the government and therefore made the government collapse, they have paid at the next elections. This was also the case for Rutte's VVD party in the last elections, where they suffered big losses, and this could well be the case again for Geert Wilders. The other factor, of course, is who will govern with him. He has now been in government twice. His party has been in government twice. The first time was from 2020 to 2012 with one of the Rutte cabinets. And there too, he was the one who stepped out of the government. So he has now twice pulled the plug on being in government, which of course doesn't lead to a lot of trust from other potential party members. The party who's looking to stand to gain the most from this this dissolution of government is potentially what the Christian Democrats, the CDA, who have already said that they will not govern with Wilders. So then the question becomes, what will the centre-right VVD do, and whether they would be open to it? This is unclear for now, but I think it will nonetheless be very difficult for Wilders to become Prime Minister in future.
So why has he done it? Why has he collapsed the government?
So he could see that a number of reasons. The first is that support for the Freedom Party kept falling in the polls. He would still, there's still suggestions that he would become the biggest party with the most number of seats in parliament, but the support was dropping. And it was particularly benefiting the VVD, the centre-right party, the alliance between the Greens and the Labour Party, and also the, as I mentioned, the CDA, the Christian Democrats. That's the first reason. So he was kind of seeing the support for his party fall and decided to do something about this. Because let's be clear, this is a crisis that could have been entirely avoided. He orchestrated a crisis around migration issues and then withdrew without really, it all happened very quickly. The second reason is that the current public debate in the Netherlands is primarily about defense and about Gaza, which are not issues that Wilders really owns and feels particularly comfortable on. So to try and regain the initiative, he has stepped out of the government, pulled the plug over immigration, which, as I say, he orchestrated this crisis. It needn't have gone this way, to try and put immigration immediately back onto the campaigning agenda, essentially. Of course, the question is whether other parties will allow him to do that. We have seen from the previous election that where immigration is a key issue, it only really benefits the far right. So certainly the Centre Party should really learn lessons from the last election, how that was run, and hold on to centrist positions.
OK, that's fascinating analysis, very clear. We thank you for that. Amanda van Rij from Chatham House's Europe programme. Thank you so much.
Thanks.